There's a moment most people never talk about, not because it's rare, but because it's uncomfortable to admit it happened. You're somewhere familiar. The job you've held for years, the relationship you've maintained, the version of yourself you've been presenting to the world since you were old enough to understand that the world had expectations. And something shifts, not outside you, inside. A quiet, unsettling recognition that the life you've been living fits like a suit someone else picked out for you. Everything looks right, nothing feels right. That's the moment life is trying to begin. And most people walk straight past it. They fill the silence with more noise, more plans, more obligations, more versions of the same conversation that keeps them safely on the surface. Because sitting with that recognition means confronting something most people spend entire lifetimes avoiding. The possibility that the self they've been protecting so carefully isn't actually theirs. Here's what the research shows. The majority of adults are operating from an identity they never consciously chose. Psychologists call it the adopted self, a personality assembled not from the inside out, but from the outside in, built from whatever earned approval early in life. Shaped by what was rewarded, pruned by what was punished, reinforced by years of repetition until it started to feel like truth. Your parents' values absorbed before you had language to question them. Your culture's definition of success accepted before you had the self-awareness to reject it. The role you played in your family, your friend group, your first workplace. Calcified into a permanent identity before you ever asked whether it was really you. And the dangerous part is this. That adopted self works. It gets you through school, through relationships, through decades of ordinary, functional life. It pays the bills and maintains the peace and keeps everyone comfortable. It's not a lie exactly. It's just not the whole truth. The whole truth lives underneath it. Waiting. People who genuinely find themselves, share one thing in common. Not a personality type, not a dramatic life event, not a particular age, just a willingness to stop moving fast enough to avoid the question and actually let it land. And what they discover when they do surprises them every time, because the self that surfaces when you strip away the performance, the fear, the desperate need for external approval, it's quieter than expected, less impressive in the ways you thought mattered, more honest than anything you've ever shown another person, and more yours than anything you've ever worn. But let's be clear about what finding yourself actually requires. Because it is not a wellness retreat. It's not a journal and a playlist and a caption about transformation. Those things can be part of it. The actual process is messier than the aesthetic. It looks like sitting in complete silence and not reaching for your phone because, the silence is trying to tell you something. It looks like saying no to something you've said yes to for years and holding your ground through the confusion that follows. It looks like grieving. Because there is grief here. You are letting go of a version of yourself you built carefully, maintained for years, and finally have to admit was never fully real. Most people skip the grief. They want the arrival without the loss that makes room for it. So they stay stuck at the threshold, curious enough to feel the call, but not willing enough to answer it. Here's what actually happens to the people who go all the way through. They don't become louder, they become clearer. Their decisions simplify, not because life gets easier, but because the internal noise drops to almost nothing. When you know who you are, most choices make themselves. You stop outsourcing your sense of direction to other people's moods, other people's timelines, other people's definitions of what your life should look like. You stop mistaking someone else's urgency for your own priority. Researchers studying identity coherence, the degree to which your values, your behaviors, and your self-concept actually line up, consistently find it is one of the strongest predictors of long-term psychological well-being, stronger than income, stronger than relationship status, stronger than achievement. When what you're doing matches who you actually are, something settles, not happiness in the conventional sense, something older and more reliable than that. Alignment, the quiet, non-negotiable sense that you are in your own life. And here's what nobody says out loud about this process. Finding yourself does not mean you stop changing. People confuse self-discovery with self-fixing. as if the goal is to locate the correct final version of who you are and defend it forever. That's not what this is. The self that emerges when you stop performing isn't a destination. It's a foundation, something stable enough to stand on while everything above it shifts. A reference point that doesn't move just because the circumstances do. The people who've done this work carry something others notice but struggle to name. It isn't confidence in the loud sense. It isn't the performed certainty of someone trying to convince the room. It's something quieter, a groundedness, a lack of desperation. They're not trying to prove anything because the argument has already been settled internally. They don't need every conversation to validate them. They don't need every decision to be witnessed and approved. They have somewhere to return to that doesn't depend on anyone else staying in the room. That kind of rootedness is visible. People feel it in how they speak, how they listen, how they hold space without needing to fill it. This is why life genuinely begins at this point. Not because the hard things disappear, not because the world suddenly cooperates, but because you are finally the one actually living it. Before this, you were managing it, maintaining the performance, navigating expectations, protecting an identity that cost you more energy every year to sustain. After this, you're present. The volume goes up on what actually matters and goes quiet on everything that never did. There's a question that follows most people through the majority of their lives, a low hum beneath every decision, every relationship, every quiet moment that gets filled too quickly with something else. Am I doing this right? Am I enough? Does any of this mean what I hope it means? People who find themselves don't always have clean answers to those questions, but they stop being terrorized by them because the foundation they've built doesn't require certainty to hold. It's made of something more durable than answers, an honest, undefended relationship with who they actually are. That changes how they love because they stop needing love to complete something that was always already whole. It changes how they work because they stop performing for an audience whose approval they never genuinely wanted. It changes how they move through the smallest, most ordinary moments of a day because ordinary stops feeling like an obstacle between them and significance. The ordinary becomes enough. Not because the bar dropped, because they arrived. So here's what this comes down to. Life does not begin at a milestone. It doesn't begin when the circumstances align or when you've figured out enough about yourself to feel ready, or when the timing finally makes sense. It begins the moment you stop waiting for permission to be who you actually are, the moment you decide to stop editing yourself for an audience that never asked for the performance. That moment is not in the future. It's available right now. In the discomfort of this exact season, in the silence you've been filling, in the version of yourself you've been keeping quiet because you weren't sure anyone would understand it. The finding happens in the looking, and the looking begins the second you stop running from what's already there. The only real question is whether you're ready to be still long enough to meet yourself, because that meeting is where everything begins. If this reached something in you, subscribe. We go deep into the psychology of who you actually are. Leave a comment. Tell us where you are in this. We read them all.